The first thing Woo Jin saw was absolutely nothing. No light, no sound, no feeling. He was surrounded by complete darkness. He tried to move his arms. Nothing happened. He tried to move his legs. Still nothing. It felt as if his entire body had disappeared. Panic slowly began creeping into his mind. The last thing he remembered was lying in bed, scrolling through his phone before falling asleep. Yet now, he found himself trapped inside an endless void. At first, Woo Jin tried convincing himself that this was only a dream. Maybe he was unconscious. Maybe he was imagining everything. Or maybe he was already dead. As he struggled to understand his situation, memories from his previous life began flooding his mind. He imagined himself as a successful student with friends, a bright future, and even a beautiful girlfriend waiting for him. But deep down, he knew none of it was real. The truth was much harsher. He had always been alone. No friends. No popularity. No one who genuinely cared about him. Even the girlfriend he often thought about was nothing. More than a fantasy he created to escape reality. Just as his thoughts began spiraling out of control, a gentle female voice suddenly echoed through the darkness. It was calm, warm, reassuring. The voice encouraged him to open his eyes. For some reason, he trusted it immediately. It felt familiar, safe, like the voice belonged to someone who genuinely cared about him. Gathering every bit of strength he had, Woo Jin slowly attempted to open his eyes. A blinding light exploded into his vision. For a moment, he thought his eyes had stopped working. Everything was painfully bright. But as his vision slowly adjusted, unfamiliar shapes began taking form. Above him was a ceiling he had never seen before. This wasn't his bedroom. This wasn't his house. It wasn't even his world. Standing beside him was a beautiful woman with blonde hair tied into a neat bun. Sweat covered her face as glowing energy flowed through her hands. Her palms rested gently against his chest. The moment Woo Jin saw her face, his heart nearly stopped. He recognized her instantly. Director Elena, the legendary S-rank healer, one of the most famous characters from his favorite novel, Solo Dungeon Monarch. At first, Woo Jin refused to believe what he was seeing. Director Elena was a fictional character. She wasn't supposed to exist. Desperately, he closed his eyes and tried waking up. Once, twice, 3 times. Yet every time he opened them again, he remained in the exact same place. Slowly, a shocking realization settled into his mind. This wasn't a dream. Somehow, he had really entered the world of Solo Dungeon Monarch. Before Woo Jin could fully process the situation, another woman entered the room. She was beautiful in a completely different way. Sharp eyes, long brown hair, a cold and professional demeanor. Sophie, Director Elena's trusted assistant. Just like Elena, she was exactly as he remembered from the novel. Sophie reminded Elena about an important association board meeting. After giving Woo Jin one final glance, Elena nodded. Before leaving, she instructed the staff to keep him under 24-hour observation. Then both women walked out of the room. As the automatic doors slid shut behind them, silence returned. Left alone with his thoughts, Woo Jin couldn't stop smiling. If he had truly transmigrated into his favorite novel, then this was the opportunity of a lifetime. He knew this world better than almost anyone. He knew the future. He knew the strongest hunters. He knew the dangers that would soon arrive. And most importantly, he now had a chance to live a completely different life. Just when Woo Jin thought he was finally alone, a faint sound echoed from the other side of the room. Turning his head with great difficulty, he noticed another patient, a young girl with short purple hair. Her skin was pale. Her expression was lifeless, and her eyes remained half open as she stared endlessly toward the ceiling. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She simply existed. Yet despite her fragile appearance, she possessed a strange beauty that immediately caught Woo Jin's attention. More importantly, he didn't recognize her from the original novel. And that meant one thing. This mysterious girl could change everything. As Woo Jin continued observing the mysterious purple-haired girl, something felt deeply wrong. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't unconscious. Yet she wasn't reacting to anything happening around her either. Her half-open eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, completely lifeless. The longer he looked at her, the more curious he became. Who was she? Why didn't he recognize her? And most importantly, why did she seem so alone? Before Woo Jin could think any further, the hospital room door slid open. A nurse entered with a cheerful smile. The moment she noticed that Woo Jin was awake, her attitude became warm and welcoming. She immediately checked his condition and explained where he was. According to her, he had been rescued from an A-rank gate and brought to the association. Central Hospital. Even more shocking, Director Elena herself had spent hours healing him. Without her intervention, he would have died. Naturally, Woo Jin's attention soon returned to the girl lying beside him. Curious, he asked the nurse who she was. The nurse's reaction was immediate. The warm smile on her face disappeared, replaced by disgust. She looked at the purple-haired girl as if she were garbage. According to her, the girl was nothing more than a burnout, someone whose mana heart had been damaged beyond repair. In a world where strength determined everything, burnouts were considered worthless. Broken, useless, forgotten. As Wu Jin watched the nurse leave, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl's condition. Suddenly, a familiar sound echoed inside his head. Ding. His eyes widened immediately. Any veteran web novel reader knew exactly what that sound meant. A system. The legendary cheat ability countless protagonists dreamed of obtaining. Excitement filled his heart. If he was lucky, this could be the key to surviving in this dangerous world. The glowing screen appeared before him. However, the skill displayed wasn't what he expected. Instead of a combat system, instead of an overpowered leveling ability, he received something called Monster Evolutionary Wife. According to the description, the skill allowed him to transform a disabled woman into a powerful high-tier monster. Not only that, he could customize her evolution, her appearance, her powers, even her future form. But there was one restriction. He could only choose one woman, one wife, one bond, forever. Before Wu Jin could fully process the absurdity of his new ability, movement beside him caught his attention. The purple-haired girl was reaching toward a glass of water. Her hand trembled violently. Every movement seemed difficult, painful, exhausting. Slowly, she extended her fingers, trying desperately to grab the glass. Then, crash! The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. What surprised Wu Jin wasn't the broken glass. It was her reaction, or rather, the lack of one. She didn't panic. She didn't apologize. She didn't even flinch. It was almost as if she had experienced the same thing countless times before. After a brief pause, she simply returned her hand to her side and continued staring toward the ceiling. At that moment, a new notification appeared before Wu Jin. Condition detected. Blindness. Damaged mana heart. Everything suddenly made sense. She wasn't ignoring the glass because she didn't care. She simply couldn't see it. The realization hit him hard. The girl everyone treated like trash wasn't lazy. She wasn't useless. She was blind. Completely blind. Moments later, the nurse returned. The instant she noticed the broken glass, her anger exploded. Without even asking what happened, she immediately blamed the girl. She called her a freak, a burden, a waste of resources. Every word was sharper than a knife. Yet the girl never fought back. She simply lowered her head and endured the insults in silence, as if she had already grown used to being treated this way. That was the moment something inside Wu Jin snapped. He couldn't stay silent anymore. Even though he barely had enough strength to sit up, he spoke. He lied and claimed the accident was his fault. According to him, he had asked the girl to pass him the water. The nurse was confused. The explanation made absolutely no sense, but it was enough to stop her from blaming the girl further. Watching the nurse leave, Wu Jin glanced toward the purple-haired girl once more. For the first time since arriving in this world, he felt something strange, something he couldn't quite explain. He wanted to help her. Watching the blind girl endure the nurse's abuse in complete silence left a bitter feeling inside Wu Jin's chest. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her past. And he certainly didn't know why she had been abandoned by everyone around her. But one thing was obvious. She needed help. The problem was, Wu Jin could barely move his own body. Determined to help her, Wu Jin forced his body to move. His muscles screamed in pain. Every small motion felt impossible, yet he refused to give up. Slowly, his arms began responding, then his shoulders. Finally, after several painful minutes, he managed to sit up. Sitting up was one thing. Standing was another. The moment his feet touched the floor, his legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed immediately. Pain shot through his body, yet despite the fall, he couldn't help but laugh. This was probably the weakest he had ever felt in his life. Eventually, Wu Jin managed to reach the water bottle. Supporting himself with furniture and sheer determination, he slowly made his way toward the girl's bed. The moment he sat beside her, she immediately became alarmed. Her hands pushed against him weakly. She clearly didn't understand why he was suddenly so close. But Wu Jin patiently explained. He wasn't trying to hurt her. He simply wanted to help. The instant the water touched her lips, everything changed. The girl drank desperately, as if she hadn't tasted water in days. She ignored Wu Jin's warnings and continued drinking until nearly the entire bottle was empty. Only then did she finally stop. Watching her, Wu Jin felt an uncomfortable realization. This wasn't normal neglect. Someone had truly abandoned her. Unfortunately, water wasn't enough. The system had already warned him. Viora was starving. Taking the bowl of rice meant for himself, Woojin returned to her bedside. At first she refused. Embarrassment colored her pale cheeks. But eventually hunger won. 1 spoonful became 2, then 3, until the bowl was completely empty. As Woojin prepared to leave, he suddenly felt a small tug on his sleeve. Looking down, he saw her trembling hand holding on to him. For the first time since they met, she tried speaking. The words were broken. Difficult to understand, yet she kept trying. Piece by piece, sound by sound, until Woojin finally understood. Her name was Viora. Night eventually fell. Silver moonlight poured into the hospital room. The 2 patients remained in their separate beds. Yet something had changed. The room no longer felt empty. It no longer felt lonely. For the first time since arriving in this world, Woojin felt a strange sense of peace. Before going to sleep, Woojin wished her a good night. To his surprise, Viora answered. Slowly, awkwardly, yet sincerely. She repeated every version of good night she could remember. Good night, sweet dreams. Sleep tight, her words were broken. But her smile wasn't. And before he realized it, Woojin found himself smiling too. The next morning, sunlight filled the room. For the first time, Woojin woke up naturally. No alarms, no stress, just warmth. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw wasn't the ceiling. It wasn't the system. It was Viora, sleeping peacefully beside him. As morning passed, Woojin noticed something unusual. Viora kept turning her face toward the sunlight coming through the window. Eventually, she raised a hand toward the warm rays and softly pointed outside. At first, Woojin thought she wanted the curtains closed. But after a few broken words, he finally understood. Viora wasn't asking him to block the sunlight. She wanted him to describe it. She wanted to know what the sun looked like. The request caught Woojin completely off guard. It was such a simple thing, something most people saw every single day without thinking about it. Yet for Viora, it was something she could only imagine. Sitting beside her bed, Woojin looked outside and began describing the scene. He told her about the golden color of the sun, about the clouds painted pink and orange by the morning light, about the feeling of warmth spreading across the world. And as he spoke, Viora listened carefully, building the image inside her imagination. Slowly, Viora turned her hand toward the sunlight. The golden rays landed gently on her palm. For several seconds, she remained completely silent. Then she whispered a single word, warm. It wasn't anything special, yet hearing it made Woojin's chest tighten. Because for the first time since they met, Viora wasn't merely surviving. She was experiencing happiness. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Viora barely spoke. Yet the smile on her face never disappeared. She simply lay there, lost in her thoughts. Whatever she was imagining seemed precious to her, and for some reason Woojin couldn't stop watching her. Every time he looked away, his eyes eventually found their way back to her again. While Viora enjoyed her peaceful moment, Woojin finally turned his attention back to the mysterious system. He called up the menu. Instantly, several options appeared before him. Skills, stats, powers, wife statistics, wife evolution, quests. The last 2 words immediately caught his attention. Wife statistics, wife evolution. Curious, he selected them. Unfortunately, the system had bad news. Every option related to wives was locked. According to the system, he didn't have a linked wife yet. Without one, most of the system's functions remained inaccessible. Even worse, his own stats were locked as well. It was as if the entire system revolved around finding a wife first. Then Woojin opened his status page. What he found there nearly stopped his heart. A timer, a very large timer. 72 hours remaining. Confused, he quickly read the warning underneath. If he failed to link a wife before the timer reached 0, the system would disappear, and he would die. Woojin nearly shouted out loud. A few moments ago, he had been worried about helping Viora. Now he was worried about staying alive. The system was basically demanding that he find a wife within 3 days, as if that were something normal people could accomplish. He wasn't a romantic genius. He wasn't handsome enough to make women fall in love instantly, and he definitely wasn't prepared to propose marriage to someone he had only known for 2 days. Unfortunately for Woojin, his reaction hadn't gone unnoticed. Viora heard his sudden outburst. Curious, she asked what had happened. Embarrassed, Woojin tried explaining it away. The explanation wasn't convincing, but Viora simply giggled. Then she said something completely unexpected. Cute. For several seconds, Woojin's brain stopped working. The terrifying countdown, the life or death situation, everything disappeared. All because a blind girl had just called him cute. As the day continued, Woojin found himself thinking about Viora more and more. Every time he looked at her, his thoughts became complicated. Was this pity? Sympathy? Friendship? Or something more? The system listed Viora as a valid candidate. One proposal, one ring, one yes. That was all it would take. Yet the more he thought about it, the less certain he became, because he didn't want to use Viora, not to save himself, not for the system. If he ever asked her to become his wife, he wanted it to be because he genuinely cared about her. The next morning, Woo Jin woke up later than usual. At first, everything seemed normal. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window. The room was quiet, peaceful. But that peace didn't last long. The moment he looked toward Viora's bed, his heart nearly stopped. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Her body was shaking violently. Her breathing was uneven. And every few seconds, her back arched painfully against the mattress. Instantly, Woo Jin jumped out of bed. Or at least he tried to. His body still hadn't fully recovered. Before he could reach her, the nurse rushed into the room. She immediately began operating several medical devices. Her expression was serious. Far more serious than Woo Jin had ever seen before. For the first time, he realized that Viora's condition wasn't simply bad, it was dangerous. Minutes felt like hours. Woo Jin could do nothing except watch. Eventually, Viora's breathing stabilized. The trembling stopped, and her body finally relaxed. Only then did the tension leave the room. The nurse let out a long sigh. Woo Jin did the same. He hadn't realized how terrified he was until that moment. After finishing her checks, the nurse revealed something unexpected. According to her, these episodes happened regularly. Viora suffered from severe psychological trauma, and because she had no guardian, no family, and nobody willing to help her, she remained trapped inside the hospital. Alone, forgotten, waiting for someone who would probably never come. After the nurse left, Woo Jin remained silent. He stared at Viora for a long time, his thoughts slowly becoming clearer, until finally, he realized something. What he felt wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy. And it certainly wasn't guilt. He genuinely cared about her. Somehow in only 2 days, this fragile blind girl had become important to him. Yet despite that realization, fear still remained. The system wanted him to choose a wife. The timer continued counting down. Every second brought him closer to death. And because of that, Woo Jin made a decision. A painful one. He stood up, walked toward the hospital door, and prepared to leave. He told himself it was the right thing to do. Viora deserved someone better. Someone stronger, someone who wasn't trying to save his own life. If he stayed, his feelings might become selfish. So he kept walking, one step, then another. Then suddenly, he stopped. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't leave. Moments later, Woo Jin walked straight back into the room. His mind was finally made up. He wasn't leaving Viora behind. Not now, not ever. Maybe the system could help her. Maybe it couldn't. But if there was even a small chance to save her, he was willing to take it. The only problem now was convincing Viora to trust him. Desperate for answers, Woo Jin questioned the system once more. Could it cure Viora? Could it heal her blindness? Could it stop her suffering? The response arrived immediately. The monster evolutionary wife skill could heal a linked wife, but there was no guarantee. It could, not it would. The answer wasn't perfect, yet for Woo Jin, it was enough. Because even a small chance was better than no chance at all. Several hours later, Viora finally woke up. The first thing she did wasn't ask about herself. She didn't ask about her condition. She didn't complain about the pain. Instead, she looked toward Woo Jin and smiled. Then, in her broken voice, she said something that shattered every wall around his heart. I guess I survived again. At that moment, Woo Jin understood something important. Viora wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She wasn't someone waiting to be saved. She was one of the strongest people he had ever met. And whether it was fate, destiny, or simply bad timing, his life had become connected to hers. But with the countdown continuing to tick away, one question still remained. Would Viora ever accept becoming his wife? Or would both of them lose everything before that day ever arrived? A mysterious system, a blind girl abandoned by the world, and only 72 hours left before death. What will Woo Jin do next? And what secrets is Viora hiding? Find out in the next episode of Yandere Monster Evolution. My blind wife will become a demonic queen.